The decision to clone Crichton was a brilliant one because it meant the producers and the audience, in a way, could have their cake and eat it too. The cake for the audience was to see, finally, Crichton and Erin together. Eating it too, from the producer's perspective, was that they could then separate us again in quite a substantial way and reset the clock, because each season it followed a pretty repetitive shape. Girl meets boy, they like each other, they can't be together, they finally get a chance to be together and something pulls them apart, and each season this would happen in new ways, and we were constantly looking for new ways.
Radiation. Massive radiation. I couldn't help it.
And death was certainly a bit of a way to separate them for a while. One thing that David Kemper said at the beginning of the show was he didn't want us to be, the aliens in the Farscape world, to be so superhuman that things didn't hurt, emotionally and physically. If you got hit, you had to get some kind of bruise or a scar or blood somewhere. And that's to do with the stakes and the consequences in the universe, and I think it gives it a more human and realistic element. He took some of Pilot's DNA, and he...
How did...
I went back there. I wanted him to find me a place where I could belong. I didn't want to get left behind. I'm so scared. So when people do die, often in science fiction, obviously, it's a thing, you know, it's a part of the nature of the genre. People can be exhumed, they can come back. There's wonderful things that happen out in that crazy alien universe that can make people spring to life again. But at the center of that, the Crichton that Erin falls in love with will never come back. He's a man that she fell completely in love with, and although she likes the other Crichton because they really are the same person, she hasn't shared that same level of development with him. So she has to sort of get to know him all over again. And concede again to love after losing both her mother twice, or 3 times in her life, but twice in season 3, and Crichton. Zan dying, that came at a huge price for Erin, because Zan had made the choice to give up her life for Erin and for Erin and John. And it goes against everything that Erin's been trained to believe in. She has to sort of keep a distance from people because they get hurt. Death was always, in our universe, was always something that had to matter and it had to count. Otherwise, the characters stood for nothing and we would cease to care about them and what happened to them. I am reminded at this point of a word that you actually brought to this vessel. Hope.
I would be lost without you.
Then you'll never be lost.
No matter what happened, you have worked your way into my heart.
You've shown me that I have one.
I love you.
I love you too.
You are so my girl.
It's difficult in science fiction to improvise as an actor, and I think the writers at first were had chosen the show to work on specifically because their work would end up intact. Not so on Farscape. There were too many things that changed. We were shooting basically the impossible. We had an incredibly difficult schedule. Farscape could not have been made at all in another country. Australia is famous for its fast turnaround television. It's not necessarily very good, but we're famous for it, and we do it. The crew particularly, not necessarily actors, but the crew do it very well. And the actors who are proficient are excellent technicians. It's difficult to get good work out there as an actor when you're shooting quickly, or for anyone for that matter. The director of photography, everything's always compromised because of time. So considering the quality that we got in the end, it was miraculous. And because of that, because things were always at such a fast pace, the sets were being turned around in overtime by a lot of people working too hard, things would have to be changed on the day from the script that had been written maybe or devised a month or two beforehand. So we were sometimes in a position where the director would have to change something, or we would call the people down from the writing department and make sure that they could make the adjustments for us. Some days we hadn't been delivered an entire script, so we would just be given pages and it would develop from there, which becomes incredibly difficult for everyone involved because you want to be taking risks. That's when you really fly as an artist or as a creator of something, and as filmmakers. So we always had to sort of simplify our choices on those occasions, because for self-preservation, but mostly for the sake of the story, because that's all you have. So you have to simplify your choices, which at other times I may have taken greater risks as an actor. For example, the episode that Ben wrote in season 4, the episode where I played the blonde princess. I could take risks there because it was a comedy piece, which had to be layered with something a bit more subversive and sinister. But at the same time, I could basically do whatever I wanted because I was playing a new character completely from scratch.
So can I help you find some place to see that sword?
And Tony and Ben just said, okay, do the scenes as they're written, and then once we get into the fight scene, just go crazy and improvise. And that was probably the largest sort of bulk of improvisation that I've experienced doing on the show. Ben improvised a fair bit with sort of cultural references, and that was often a timely matter because if something had just happened in the news, he would reference it that day in the script on the set as it happened. So we would improvise in those ways.
Oh, wow. Wait.
What?
Orisk fruit.
Remind me not to put that on my Cocoa Pops.
Aaron is the most physical part I've ever had to play, and I totally made it up as I went along because I was the nerd at school that was totally uncoordinated, still am quite uncoordinated, have a very fast metabolism, so I've never, until now, touch wood, had to diet. I have a very healthy appetite, actually. All the crew used to sort of comment on how much food I used to pile on my plate. So I've done a few things here and there when I've actually had an injury from a fight scene, because I'm not trained in martial arts, in case no one had worked that out, because I admire all the women on TV shows who have had, you know, training, because they look incredible. I'd always be taught how to do something a couple of minutes before we did the scene, and I always felt so unconfident about it. So if I had my time again, I'd love to do the training. I was always supposed to train properly with some guys from our special forces, and we could never get it together because Farscape took over our lives in ways that we just could not have imagined. It was bigger than anyone could have expected. And the production office were in the midst of arranging the training, and I was still filming Pitch Black, so I didn't have a chance in hell of doing any sort of physical training before it. And in the breaks, we were always going off on publicity tours. So I just used to say a little prayer, and Dad rang me one night and said, I watched another episode tonight. You had a bit of a limp wrist when you were doing your punches. Thanks, Dad, I'll remember that. Physically, it was the most draining project I've ever worked on. We didn't work in conditions that were fantastic, I have to say. We weren't in purpose-built studios. We had no proper air conditioning. They did the best that they could. We had sort of Robbie the Robot portable units, which we would attach big tubes to and try and pump cold air into the sets. There were some days where I knew I would not make it through the day unless I was horizontal for about 5 or 10 minutes. So I'd just throw down my lunch and then just have a lie down because it was so exhausting.
What are you doing in here, anyway?
Oh, I just wanted to, be there.
Thank you.
Don't mention it.
Why would I ever mention it?